So thank you very much, everyone, for joining. I'm Perrine Toledano, the Director of Research and Policy at the Columbia Center on Sustainable Investment, for short CCSI. We sit at Columbia University in New York, and we focus on the laws and policies that shape investment to contribute to sustainable development in general and to the energy transition in particular. We are co-hosting this event with the Green Hydrogen Organization, GH2 for short. I'm sure you know very well. GH2 is a multi-stakeholder organization working to scale up production and use of green hydrogen globally in a way that is sustainable and fair. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining our webinar on fast and fair permitting, bridging progress, and community trust. So as you know, there is an urgent need to scale up renewable energy sources such as hydropower, geothermal, solar, wind, and green hydrogen infrastructure. However, in many regions globally, the lengthy approval processes impede the timely execution of these projects. So addressing the gap is quite imperative. CCSI, together with GH2, worked on this issue to inform the recommendations of the Planning for Climate Commission. The Commission is a multi-stakeholder undertaking supported by the UN Secretary General and in charge of stating out how fit-for-purpose planning and approval processes for renewable energy projects and the green hydrogen economy should look like. GH2 manages the secretariat of this initiative, and our panelist, Joe Williams, a director at GH2, will give us an overview of the action plan to make it work. The other distinguished panelists that I will introduce in a minute will zoom in on two specific core tenets of this plan: community engagement and benefit sharing mechanisms. The panelists, all from their viewpoints and stakeholder group, will shed light on the importance of fast and fair permitting processes and on the role of carefully regulated and designed policies in ensuring fair treatment, fast deployment, and societal support for project advancement. So we are fortunate today to have an exceptional panel with us, each bringing knowledge and experience in different areas. Joe Williams, Director of Strategy and Communications at GH2, Ada Garcia, Policy Advisor for Renewables at Euroelectric, which represent the electricity industry at the European level, Jackson Shah, Executive Director of the Narasha Community Development Group from Kenya, Ana Belen Sanchez, Just Transition Advisor at the Cabinet of the Third Vice President and Minister of Ecological Transition and Demographic Challenge in Spain. Each of the panelists will briefly provide their insights, and hopefully we will have time for a short Q&A at the end. Please feel free to add your questions in the chat, and then we will take notes and address them to the panelists at the end. Without further ado, Joe, the floor is yours to introduce the 9-pillar plan of the Planning for Climate Commission and how it will also be further promoted at COP28 in Dubai.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Perrine. Can you see my screen? Can someone just give me a thumbs up?
Great.
Okay, fantastic. So thank you very much for that framing, Perrine. We're absolutely delighted to be working with you and the team at CCSI on this project, and I'm personally very interested in this particular topic of today's webinar. And I know we're probably all very keen to move into the detail of that, the nitty-gritty of how we do get meaningful community engagement and benefit sharing. So I'm going to provide a little bit of a framing in terms of the 9-point plan and where we are with the Planning for Climate Coalition. So without further ado, I'm just going to share a couple of slides. Much of this Perrine has spoken to already, so I'm not going to repeat it. But we are, of the view on this 4th bullet point here that streamlined and expeditious permitting and licensing of renewable energy and green hydrogen infrastructure are, of course, critical to tackle climate change. And what has happened with the Planning for Climate Coalition is that it essentially started off with a number of commissioners who put together a report with nine recommendations. Many of you were involved in this, and it has now transitioned into and will be launched into a coalition on planning at COP28. And I should say thank you so much for joining today's webinar. I know a lot of us are very busy ahead of the climate negotiations beginning this week. So it's wonderful to see you on the call. So very quickly, the coalition itself will really try to focus on three different things. One is, regular permitting progress and review. So this really gets to the issue of benchmarking and assessment. So how can we, aim to half permitting timeframes with high standards of community engagement embedded in all of the principles, frankly, not just the couple of principles we've talked about, we'll be talking about today, by 2030. We don't have long, but we think regular assessment will be important. So the coalition will be working out how to do that and to benchmark, so we can have a race to the top, as it were. We also see the value and the need for a permitting network and some form of capacity development and building, which takes place. And this really, there are thousands of permitting authorities and officials within permitting authorities, all over the world, who are doing this very issue, 8-9 hours every single day. We really need to tap into, as a community, the value that these officials bring to the work, and to ensure that they're able to speak to each other and speak externally as well. And the other issue that we think is important is trying to bring it to the national, subnational, local level as quickly as possible. So regional and country reform coalitions are going to be part of the work of the coalition. There was a really interesting call with an incredible group of stakeholders for the beginning of a coalition in Australia on Monday, and I just had wonderful visions of this sort of national coalition having a good conversation with other national coalitions around the world to raise standards and to work out how we can accelerate these issues. So that's a little bit the plans for the coalition itself. As Perrine mentioned, there is a 9-point plan. I'm absolutely not going to go into all the details of the 9, otherwise we won't have time to talk about the really important meat of today's discussion. Suffice to say that the plan, which had a lot of multi-stakeholder engagement, was drafted and agreed upon by a set of commissioners, multi-stakeholder. That was agreed back in September of this year. And very quickly, that 9-point plan is, first of all, one, to innovate to shorten permitting timeframes. Innovate is the operative word here. We all know we need to shorten permitting timeframes, but what can we do differently? Second is obviously streamline the permitting processes in a transparent and predictable manner. So what are the low-hanging fruit, IT technology, online applications, all these sorts of issues, one-stop shops that can be used to streamline processes as quickly as possible. 3 and 4 are, very much at the heart of this discussion today. Communities right from the outset, building it into the whole planning approach, not a tick box, obviously, towards the end of the process, and deploy carefully designed and regulated benefit sharing mechanisms. And I will look to Perrine on this one, because we were very careful about how we titled this particular principle: carefully designed and regulated benefit sharing mechanisms. Number 5 is to put in place strong policies and safeguards to limit environmental impacts. So of course, not cutting any corners when it comes to the environmental, or at least some of the non-emissions related environmental impacts that might come about. Grid infrastructure is obviously hugely important. So how to accelerate the build out of that grid infrastructure, but also the the new infrastructure, for example, that will be needed for green hydrogen, which, estimates range from anything from sort of 8% to 20% of final energy demand will be from green hydrogen by mid-century. So there's a huge amount of infrastructure that needs to be put in place. How do we ensure that planning is there to do that? Allocate land appropriately and strategically. This links back to principles sort of 3 and 4 as well. And there's a whole history and range of issues that that this particular issue has faced. So that's an important principle that's built in to the Commission. 8, strengthen and optimize institutional capacity at central and local levels. I think with the coalition that will be launched in just a few days' time, we're starting to work out how to do that and to have peer learning. And then, of course, to avert technological risks by adopting rigorous standards. So how do we lock in some of this learning through technology and through standards? So that's a very quick overview. If you'll permit me, finally, Perrine, just very quickly to say the coalition will be launched at the Global Renewables Hub at COP28 in Dubai on the 4th of December. If you happen to be there, you're very welcome to come. My colleague Simran will drop a link into a reception which will take place after the launch. And to accompany it, and very much focused on those recommendations and those 9 points, we're also going to have a COP28 call to action on fast and fair permitting, and we're requesting sign-ons, at least initial sign-ons, by the 1st of December. Again, my colleague Simran will pop that into the chat. So I think I will leave it there and stop sharing my screen and hand back to you, Perrine. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Joe. It's all clear, and we look forward to COP28. Ada, I'm turning over to you. So you stand for the electric sector. So I'd like you to share the industry perspective on the latest permitting package released by the EU in the updated Renewable Directive. I'd love to know how it reflects the 9-pillar plan that Joe presented, and whether you think that the community question is appropriately dealt with within that package. Ada,
thank you very much. Thank you very much, Perrine. Just checking that you hear me okay? Yes. Thanks so much for the invitation, for having us on this super important panel. At Euroelectric, we represent, as you said, the electricity industry in Europe, all the players across the value chain, from generation, like wind, solar, also other technologies like nuclear, suppliers, and also distribution system operators, so grids. So we have quite a holistic view of the sector. If that's okay, in order to react to your question, I propose that I break it into 3 parts. The first one is a bit giving you the size of the challenge in Europe. Second is a reaction to the 9-point plan that Joe just presented, and the interlinkages with the Renewable Energy Directive that has just been adopted in Europe, and the new permitting framework that we have here. And finally, also our thoughts on benefit sharing mechanisms. So to start with a little bit on the big picture, as you certainly know, in Europe, we need to increase wind and solar capacity. We need to triple it by 2030. And there's a lot of pressure to deliver on those targets. To put it in perspective, if we are to set the targets, this would imply adding wind and solar capacity equivalent to 80% of the total capacity, electricity capacity that we have right now in the European Union, and we have to deliver this in less than 6 years. So this gives you a bit the size and the pressure, the time pressure of this challenge. Definitely, permitting, it's one of the most important barriers. There are cases where you only get the permit after 10 years, when you only need 2 to build a wind farm. So there's definitely there's a need to work with policymakers and with communities to see how we can optimize the permitting process. And that's why also this 9-point plan is so timely, and we hope that policymakers adopt it not only in Europe but also outside. So congratulations to you for putting this forward. Now, concretely on the 9-point plan, I think there are 4 things that really stand out, and that where we can also learn from the European Union's experience. First one, it's on a clear definition of permitting and also clear deadlines. The developers should have clear visibility on what are the different steps and when they end. At the end of the day, it all lies on adequately staffing our permitting authorities. It's not always possible to have all those human resources that we need, either in number or either being adequately skilled to deal with those projects. So to meet the deadlines, I went through your 9-point plan, and I see that you've proposed an innovative approach called positive silence, whereby the steps get approved if there's a lack of reply by the authorities. And now the message that we want to bring there is that that's only a default option, and that the ideal scenario is that the authorities are adequately staffed. And that's what we should also strive for making sure that we have skilled people processing those permits in a timely manner and rigorously. Second point that I'd like to highlight is our support for overriding public interest, and also a clarification. The status of overriding public interest, and I think you name it the priority status. We advocated for it as well at European level because this can ensure a good working balance between the expansion of renewables and other societal interests, such as, for example, protection of biodiversity. And it would also help deal with the legal challenges that so often delay the construction of new renewable capacity. But what's more important is that this status does not entail any watering down of the environmental standards, because it doesn't change in any way the rules of that need to be followed for carrying out, for example, environmental impact assessment or other environmental impact measures. So very clear message: environmental overriding public interest does not entail watering down of environmental standards. Third point is on the streamlining land planning. You mentioned as well in this plan the idea of designated acceleration areas, and it's actually a very good idea to have these low impact areas, and member states, European member states, will have to designate this in Europe very soon as well, in some months. But it's also key to understand that our industry will need to build outside those acceleration areas to reach the target. So the permitting process shall be accelerated for all the projects, not just for the ones that are in the acceleration areas. Last point on the reaction of to the 9-point plan is your mention to nature positive deployment of renewables. Full support also. It's very positive that you bring this forward. It's something that our industry is also striving for. We shouldn't forget, though, that we are fighting the same cause, right? At the end of the day, climate change is the main threat to biodiversity. So also by supporting renewables deployment, we are fighting biodiversity loss. Having said that, our industry is integrating nature protection measures in their project designs. And from a regulatory point of view, we should think about how to make those projects more scalable. Initially, we think there are 3 key enablers. First one is about creating demand, because these projects have a different cost structure compared to conventional projects. A second one, we need more research into it. There are a lot of those measures that we are putting forward needs to be tested, needs to be evaluated against. And the third one is to maybe agree on some metrics in order to measure what are the negative and positive impacts of renewables into nature. And at Dude Electric, we have a project called Power Plant where we dive deep into all those elements. So if you want to hear more about it, you can also reach out to me bilaterally, maybe. Finally, just to wrap up as well, reaction on community benefit sharing mechanisms. Again, it's super welcome that you are putting this into the debate. I'd say for our industries in our first interest that we bring the people forward with us. And actually the separate paper that SSC put forward, I found it like a very thorough assessment of some of the key benefit sharing arrangements that most of the developers are already carrying out or are increasingly carrying out. Some points there is that first, we need to know that there are different social realities that you can find across geographies. Every project and every community will have a different story and a different concern. So having a top-down approach might be counterproductive at the end of the day. Sometimes the concerns are about the number of turbines, others about the setback distance, others is the impact on existing land users. So it's crucial that we have a dialogue with the local authorities and with the communities before giving very prescriptive regulation from, for example, the European Union institutions or any other sort of supranational authority. In that sense, the Renewable Energy Directive, I think they took a good approach. The European Renewable Energy Directive, they mandate public participation in Article 15D of the directive, and they ensure that there's public participation at least during the design, the planning, and the designation of those renewable acceleration areas. Not only for renewables deployment, but also for infrastructure. And my last point is about sharing some ideas on how these benefit sharing programs should be designed. I think industry would also benefit from having some agreed principles, as you mentioned, at least in our bilateral meeting, Perrine. If we had to break them down, I think the first one is that the arrangement is transparent and the agreement is public. The second one is that the project shall be independent, so you need to have a strong team behind it, managing it. The third principle is that you may want that the amount of the benefit is predefined, so it's not up to negotiation, but it's already very clear from the beginning how much money the community is going to get. For example, the German case is quite exemplary. I think they predefined 2 cents per kilowatt hour, something like this, in their EEG law. The third point, it's about how you spend the money, and this needs to be negotiated and agreed and decided by the community, right? And finally, there must be also an obligation on reporting and monitoring the program throughout the years. It's not just about agreeing an amount of money, but also making sure that this is spent wisely, or it's not just about allocating the funding, but also monitoring that is spent wisely. So that's just the end of my initial reactions, and thank you very much for having us. Looking forward to the rest of the conversation.
Thank you very much, Aida. I think the last part of what you said is a good segue to Jackson's intervention. We'll see how Jackson, standing in Kenya for the community group of Narasha, we'd be interested to hear from you, Jackson, on your reaction regarding what Ada mentioned. You've been, I think your group has been effective in promoting community rights and engagement through renewable energy projects. We'd love to hear about what you see as being good practices in that matter, and lessons learned overall from your entire experience. Jackson, over to you.
Thank you, Doreen, for allowing me the space, and thank you for invitation. I'm so glad to be in this conference or this meeting to share the experience of my community. I come from Narasha community in Kenya, which is an indigenous group, living actually in the heart of geothermal project, which is one of the Kenyans' greatest source of energy. And the projects are very important, not only to the country, but also to the people. And therefore, reacting to the discussion or the point that have been put forward, I find a lot of issues that very important, particularly in addressing our struggles as a community. And just to begin, I wish to share a small file to show what I'm discussing. The reason why I'm bringing this is actually to give you the understanding of where we come. This is a land which belongs to the community. And this community has been actually displaced by these projects. And these are very many projects. It's not one project. There are more than 4 to 5. One company has like 6. You see, we have Career 1, Career 2, Career 3, Career 4, Career 5, Career 6. And there is also a potential of another up to 14. And that means more land is still needed. And if there is no clear and well-structured policies that can address the issue of affected community, it causes a lot of delay and affect the project development. And therefore, from the community point of view, we always say development should be for the people. And being members of the community and the people within the country and also members of a society, we also deserve to be recognized and also be given the space. And this is where we always struggle. These 9 points are very critical in terms of addressing the gap between the development and the community. And that can actually help to speed up development. It can help in addressing the issues that are affecting the community. Beginning from the issue, let me begin with the community engagement because I think it is one of the critical issues. The voice of the people is very important. The more people come in sharing their views, they also feel they are part and parcel of the process. And if they miss within the process, then they have to fight for the space. They have to fight for them to be there. And therefore, to avoid a delay, which might cause more damages, their process, their presence, their participation is critical. And let me just bring an example from my place. Orcadia 4, I think it is, you can see Orcadia 4 in the map. It is almost at the center of the map, which is a project funded by African Development Bank, World Bank, and the European Investment Bank, and many others, because it was a big project. This project displaced a community of 3,000 people, 150 families. And before, there were no plans for them to be relocated until they fought the space. That time of the time when they are fighting, when they are looking for their space, it also delay the project. They are able, and fortunate enough, because not every community has a space of reaching the financials. But for them, they were able to reach the financials. And therefore, they were able to communicate. Because at the ground, at the country level, there was no space. Therefore, the pressure from outside. That pressure from outside delayed the whole process because the funders were not able to release their money because the community were not engaged in the process of dealing with their issues were not dealt. That caused the delay of the project. Another project is the one done by Akira One. It is just next to that one. This project just took copy-paste the environmental impact assessment of Kengen and tried to apply. And because they are not conversant, they cause a big damage. They end up affecting our community, burning their homes, and that made the European Investment Bank withdraw from funding the project. That's a damage. Damage of the company, withdrawal of funding, and that will continue the delay. The other thing is our government policies. This is why we see all these 9 points are very important. Policy framework plays a great role in terms of addressing this particular gap. Looking at the example for Kenya, where is the space for community? Our constitution particularly speaks very well and very clearly that community must be consulted and engaged in any projects that will be happening within their territories. But unfortunately, realization of this is never there. Therefore, enforcement and implementation is a critical issue. Therefore, this is where we also need to see how can the 9 points be implemented? How can we bring these people to space and all play the same role? Therefore, this is a critical issue when we're addressing the issue of energy. Energy speeds development. It increases any country's improvement and all that. But if there is poor policies, if there is no community engagement, if land issues are not addressed, which are some of them come back from the colonial time. For example, in Kenya, the Maasai community where I come from, they struggle from land issues. The same thing is spilling over to development projects. And unless they are dealt properly, how to secure land, that will be a big issue. And lastly, the issue of the environment. This is where I find the company Akira One. They never considered issue of addressing pollution, how to address issues that may erupt due to the new project. Therefore, policies are critical, and this is where I want to center my point. Policies are critical. It also gives the community benefits. If there's no clear benefit, for example, in Kenya, we don't have any policy that can guarantee their community benefit. A number of times they have been trying to regulate it, to formulate that policy, but because of political negative towards that, they have never decided to do that. We are trying now use the international policies, the indigenous rights policies, the human rights policies from Africa, from other parts of the world that speak about the indigenous communities. That is how we are struggling as communities at the community level. Therefore, to address this, I am just glad to be part of Green Hydrogen Organization to make sure that we bring this voice out, share with the communities, share with the policymakers that this issue should be addressed to allow the communities a space so that they can also contribute as these equal partners, not just partners, but equal partners. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Jackson. Are you taking the 9-point plan to your government?
Yes.
In Kenya?
This is very critical. And this is where I think being part of the COP28 or taking this to the COP28 is critical because Kenya has a big space, or they are strongly supporting the COP28 proposals or what they are trying to push for, and they are coming in strongly. Therefore, this is where this is a big space to make sure that Kenya can realize the importance of addressing the gap in terms of policy, in terms of speeding up the issue of projects, and what can actually help.
Oops. Jackson's connection froze a little.
In addressing the energy gap. Yeah.
We lost
Sorry.
we lost you for a couple of seconds. It's okay, I think.
Yeah, I think it is my network. Therefore, I'm saying Kenya need to take into consideration these particular issues. They are very critical. Therefore, they will be in the COP28. And I wish the government of Kenya can have an opportunity to learn from green hydrogen energy and other stakeholders who are pushing on this particular point, because it is critical. And fortunately enough, the formation of Climate Commission, Kenya has a lot of interest. And I think it's a space for us to address this issue.
Great. I like this optimistic tone, Jackson.
Thank you.
Anna, we're turning over to you on this continuing topic of the just transition, basically. So Anna, you're working, just as a reminder, you're working for the government of Spain on just transition, and in this capacity, you've led innovative just transition projects enabling the conversion of the country towards renewables from coal mainly. Can you please let us know a bit more about this?
Yes, of course. I have prepared this presentation. Let me share with you. I think it should be okay now.
Yeah, if you can put it in a diaporama,
That's it, right?
Slideshow, yeah.
So thank you very much for the invitation. First of all, it's very interesting to see how different countries are having very different experiences, of course, with the extension of renewable energies and just transition as well. So I wanted to share this presentation because maybe not everybody knows how Spain is working on this very specific issue, which is just transition. And I wanted just to give a brief overview about that, and then I will go into how we are doing very much on your point 3 and 4, engage communities, benefit sharing, and a few other things. So first of all, we are part of the Ministry of Ecological Transition. We are the Just Transition Institute, and we have a Just Transition strategy. That was our first step, and was a very important step because this is part of the law and energy and climate law. So we are the Just Transition strategy, and everything that we do about that, it's at the very same level at the regulatory side, let's say, than our objectives in terms of energy efficiency, renewable energy production, etc. And that has been very important for us because that has allowed us to really integrate our policies, which are very much linked to community participation and other things, to the climate and energy law. Secondly, it was also important to have the institution to deal with just transition, because some countries that want to do that, they lack the institutionality of the process, and this is an issue. And we do have the institute, the Just Transition Institute, which is part of the Secretary of State for Energy of the Ministry for Ecological Transition. And here you have the 5 main areas, let's say, of work. First of all, which I think it's important in this discussion, maximize benefits and minimize adverse consequences of the ecological transition. That in our case is renewable energies, green hydrogen projects. It's about decarbonization, current industries. It's about, for example, restoring damaged ecosystems because of coal mines. So this is important. We do work on this issue of equal access to opportunities, particularly on gender and rural areas compared to urban areas. For us, these two areas are very important. We pay a lot of attention to this idea of the dynamic framework for policy implementation. We have done things that are not that usual in other frameworks, let's say. We try to think out of the box and think how can we achieve our goals in an accelerated manner, because that's the problem that we have with the climate emergency situation that we all are facing. Then we have an urgent action plan for coal regions and power plants, and you will see that we have done quite a lot on that. Our objective has been to phase out coal mining and coal from the energy electricity production, and that's what we have done. We are also working on a couple of nuclear power plants closure sectors, you'll see. This is just a few lessons learned from our side. This slide is important to understand how we work in Spain. This is the map of Spain, and these color areas are those areas that are affected by either the coal mining closure or coal power plant closure. So this is a very specific, you'll see that all these borders are very specific because we have identified those municipalities that are affected by these two processes. We are also dealing with a couple of nuclear power plants closure because they didn't have any plan to create alternative jobs, and we wanted to make sure that those new jobs were there. And how we work, here is where participation comes. We have two sectoral agreements, tripartite agreements, social dialogue that we have with trade unions that are very important for us, the participation, and with employers and the business community. One is for coal mining, and it has this very long title. And the second one is Framework Agreement for Just Transition, Coal Mining and Sustainable Development. You have there. We call it the Coal Tripartite Agreement, and the other one, the coal mining, and this is the Agreement for a Just Transition for Coal Power Plants. So here, those has been very important for us because it has shaped the different commitments that we all have, trade unions, employers, or companies themselves, and the government, in order to create these new jobs that I was saying in my slide before. For us, the way of measuring whether or not the just transition has been achieved is to understand to what extent employment has been affected. So our intention always is to create the same number or more number of jobs that are affected by this closure process. So we also work with the communities themselves, not only at this macro level with the trade unions and the business. We also work with the communities themselves, all those 185 municipalities that are affected by those closing processes that are part of the just transition agreements. That's our mechanism, our tool that we have invented, which is working at the territorial level. And what we did is to discuss with them, which is the plan to create all those jobs, what kind of projects we could be supporting from the national administration, regional administration, and local administration, but and also not only that, but also from the private investments that were coming from the business community. This is an ongoing process, so we have events in a regular basis in those areas with stakeholders that are there. And we have budgets coming from different areas, national budget, next generation budget, and just transition fund budgets from the EU. If you are from the EU, you are very much familiar with all those budgets. If you are out from outside the EU, those might be new to you. And then a couple of ideas. Just transition can be achieved. That many times we have this doubt. We have already reduced 80% of our greenhouse gas emissions that came from coal. All coal mining have been closed, and all coal power plants are either already closed or has been requested to be closed before 2025. We are right now in the closing process of As Pontes, which is one of the largest coal power plant in Galicia in Spain. And we have in Spain, we have one of the largest environmental restoration projects of degraded coal mining. It's interesting as well. Something that we have seen, and the previous speaker was very much talking about that, Jackson, is this idea of combining different interests. And this is very much about environmental protection, the renewable energy projects, etc. Which is important is to understand that you have, at least as an administration, you have to see how you can play with them and how you can make the most for the community. And that's what we have done. Well, this is maybe not in this particular presentation is that important for you, but we have many elements to support workers, because for us it's very important, making sure that people are okay. We have a number of them, skills, employment services, and other things. We also are we are part of the ecological transition ministry, and for us, the environmental protection of the community is very important. And we have these 3,700 hectares that are being right now restored. And something that I like very much is that we are hiring former coal miners. So the ones that used to be working here as coal miners, now they have kind of become green jobs, green workers, let's say, and are working in these green restoration projects, which is very important for the community in terms of environmental protection. Here you have waste management, improving water quality, but also we have a very strong participation process with the communities where this land degraded area is, because we pay a lot of attention to what's going to happen later on in this area. So we want to make sure that there is the opportunity to have new business. That's why we ask the community, what do you want to do in terms of the restoration projects for this area where you are located? And they say, we want to have apiculture, businesses, rural tourism, silviculture. There is a little bit of everything. And then we are working with them in order to accelerate the implementation of those business. Again, we work with the business community, with the local business community. Here you have the number of projects that we have subsidized. And then here you have the green hydrogen plants. It's very important for us, industrial scale, different type of industrial projects. And we work with them, with the companies that own the coal power plants that are being closed, which in Spain are 4, Naturgy, EDP, Endesa, /Enel, and Iberdrola. I'm sure you know all of them. So we work with them, and something that has been very important, thanks to this tripartite agreement that I was mentioned at the very beginning, is that they have committed to invest 7,000 million euros in all this area, renewable energy, green hydrogen, industrial value chain of renewable energies, in those color areas that I was showing you before in the Spanish map. So that's why I was telling you that the number of jobs that were going to be created are really estimated bigger than the ones that are close. We also work with the municipalities, maybe not that important in this discussion, but very much important, because they are very much affected by this shifting of investments in terms of energy. So we work with them, and we subsidize as well the project that, according to a number of criteria, of course. And this is the type of projects that they do: sustainable tourism, digitalization, co-working, entrepreneurship centers. Everything is local, it's municipal infrastructure, so it's not private, but it's municipal, public, social housing, social sanitary centers. There is a little bit of everything. Everything is in our website if you want to know it. This is the best practice that I wanted to talk to you, but before going into detail, I think it was good to have this overview. So this is something that we wanted to do. We were thinking how we can go and step forward, go a little bit further on that. And we came up with this idea that was really thinking out of the box. And it was kind of a complex process for the administration. And it's the Just Transition tender. So what we did is that the coal power plant that was closed in this area, which is Teruel, Andorra is the municipality, but the province is Teruel. It was a big coal power plant. It was 1,200 megawatts. So it was clear that there was a need to produce alternative energy sources, and based, of course, according to the Spanish climate law, based on renewable energies. So our idea was to say what could happen if we have this tender for the best company, for the best proposal of a company that bring us not only the solar PV or the wind energy or whatever energy storage or green hydrogen production, but also that proposal came with just transition type of projects, because we wanted to make sure that the community, that particular community, was positively affected by all these new investments on renewable. So we did the tender. There was 12 different companies interested on that. So if you are understanding well, they needed to come with the idea of the renewable energy plants. That's what I'm going to do on solar, wind, blah blah blah. But also they had to say what they're going to do in order to create local jobs. Okay, and each of them came with a different idea. Enel/Endesa was the company that was awarded the tender, and it's working right now on that. And those are the areas. Here you have, well, the numbers are important, 1,500 million investments that are being invested by Enel, and a very important number of job creation for this particular area. That's what they are going to do in order to create those local jobs. Solar tracker manufacturing plant, you see, electrolyzer factory, wood chip processing plants for biomass heating. They are also going to create a concrete factory to produce the wind tower industry. And all this is going to happen in this particular community that, if you know Spain, you know the particularities of terrain. But also, they also came with some ideas to support in terms of biodiversity production and biodiversity, not production, but biodiversity support, let's say. This idea of recovering 50,000 centenarian olive trees that used to be there before the plant, and they were a little bit lost in the middle. And then they have different agreements with the agro productors from the community, shepherds, beekeepers, because, as you know, we have this idea of agrivoltaic production. So they wanted to make sure that they could do that with these solar PV projects that they wanted to have there. So they wanted to make sure that there was this, how to say, dynamic community between the primary sector and the energy sector. And something that they has done, for example, is that they had to train people, 1,300 unemployed people in the community, and some of the areas, in addition to the wind energy installation, solar panel installation, that are a traditional type of training for this type of projects, is that they are supporting biodiversity protection. Protection was the word that I was looking for before. Biodiversity protection projects. And this is important because this is kind of the first time, or less, as far as I know, that the energy community is working with different people, I would say, different organizations, NGOs and others, in order to have these trained people to protect biodiversity. They do other things, energy efficiency and women empowerment and business development and other things. Everything is online if you want to know more about that. So that's the best practice that I wanted to share with you, because we believe that's something that is not easy at all to implement in the administration. But if you manage to do it, if you are working in a ministry and you manage to do it, it's really it really accelerates this idea of benefit sharing and just transition. So that's it. We pay a lot of attention to the gender perspective, and a little bit more. 3 weeks ago, we published our, the news that we were joining the Equal by 30 commitment, because we really want to do more about that, because the gender gap is very, very strong, not only for us in Spain, but for the EU as in a whole. So we wanted to pay attention to that, and that's all. And back to you.
Wow.
This
is really impressive on the part of government. Good political will to make it work. It's really great.
Thank you.
I think in the chat for the last 3 minutes of the webinar, I'm seeing that Jackson reacted to the restoration, ecosystem restoration process that you put in place, which I think he would want to see in Kenya, right, Jackson? It doesn't seem to be systematically happening in Kenya. And hopefully it can enter the policy framework in Kenya soon. And then Charlie was reacting from the perspective of the US, sharing some good resources on the ongoing effort in the US to implement the renewable energy tax and cash incentives contained in there. 2021, what is the IIJA and also the IRA? I'm blanking out on IIJA. Charlie, if you want to open your microphone. So we have good resources here posted by Charlie regarding infrastructure laws. Okay, regarding US. Yeah.
Just real quick, yeah, just the two big federal laws in the US that are particularly relevant to hydrogen. One was a 2021 law that funded what are now these 7 hydrogen hubs that are being funded in the US. So it's called the Infrastructure and Investment something Act. And then 2022 Inflation Reduction Act added some very serious and helpful tax incentives. But the Biden administration is very eager to address some of the issues that you folks are talking about in this panel discussion, has devoted serious resources. That first link, I think, takes you to some very useful resources and folks who are working on this precise issue, trying to ensure a just transition. How do you since the existing energy infrastructure projects were often in environmentally and economically disadvantaged communities, how can we ensure that all the new money that's flowing into those areas potentially doesn't repeat the mistakes in the past? So hopefully some good resources.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Charlie. It brings me back to the links that Simran posted from GH2, reminding us about the event at COP28, where I think it'd be great to hear about all these experiences from Spain to Kenya to the US, and make sure that we get to some consensus on what should be done, obviously taking into account the specific geographies, the specificities of each geography. And then Simran also posted the call to action, inviting everyone to join the coalition, and the call to action. It's a Google Doc, so if you can grab these links, but I guess Simran can send it around by email after the webinar. On this note, I'd like to thank you, everyone, and obviously our panelists for their great interventions. And we are always happy at GH2 or CCSI to continue the conversation offline. So please reach out to share any thoughts. And thank you very much again.